during those early 50s, the team was very, very dominant. You won 23 in a row and didn't lose 26 games.
Yeah.
You won the premierships in 51 and 52.
Yeah.
What was it like being in a team that was just invincible at the time?
Well, it was good in as much as that it gave the players a little bit more confidence too, and I had enough confidence because I'd been in the war, and things like that. So I mean, we established this game, this team, and it was very strong, and that was why we managed so well.
What was it like being captain for you of the?
Yeah, well, see, I was looking after troops during the war. I was, as I said, I'd been sent away to do an officer's training school, and so I was only young, and it was most unusual, really, to be doing officers' training skills when you were only 19, 20. So that's so it didn't worry me. When the teams were being put together, it was in my thoughts that it didn't worry me being captain. Didn't worry me at all. I wasn't any side or anything like that. I was just a normal fellow, but I never worried about it, which is pretty good. So we did very well and won lots of games. And,
that first premiership, 1951 against Essendon.
Yes.
Do you have some memories or some thoughts about that day?
Yes. We played Essendon, of course, and we were unfortunate that year because Russ Renfrey, our full forward, was injured, and Russ Renfrey did the job, and he did very well, and so to the strength that we won it, and it went on then to the next one was 92, 52
against Collingwood.
Yeah.
How were you able to go back to back, win 2 in a row? But this team now hasn't been able to do it back to back. They've won 3 in 5 years. Very difficult to back up your premiership performance the year after. You guys were able to do that in 51 and 52.
Yeah.
What was 52 like in terms of being the premiers and wanting to have that success again and finally getting it when you beat Collingwood?
Yeah, well, we had a good team, and we eventually got to the stage where there was Collingwood and their team were playing off in the grand final, and so it didn't worry us because we got confidence in our own life. I think we won by 4, 5 or 6 goals. Was it? I think it was.
What are some of the great moments in your 5 years here? Obviously, the 2 premierships stand out in the grand final. But sum up your time here as a Cats player.
Oh well, I'd say the best memory was the 51 premiership, running out in the ground, and the crowd was amazing. In fact, they had to let the crowd jump the fence, and we actually played with the crowd on the boundary. So it cut the ground down by about 2 metres all the way round. And you'd have to slow down if you're coming to the boundary, you run into a crowd of people. So it was a bit daunting.
What are your other memories of that win over the Bombers, who were Bombers, Collingwood? You guys were such great teams during that era. But that day against Essendon, what do you?
Well, my memory was one of my memories was Dickie Reynolds. They brought Dickie Reynolds in for the grand final, and Dickie was about 37, I think, and I think it was pretty embarrassing for for Dickie as well as Essendon, because he never went too good.
It was a great year, finished with a great game. You guys were able to start what was an amazing run of 26 games unbeaten, including 23 wins, unbeaten streak. What was the basis for that success during that 2 years?
I think we're probably, I'd say we're probably one of the first teams that actually started the style of handball. I think the Flanagan and them had a meeting and they said, well, why don't we, it's training one night, and they said, why don't we just, instead of kicking it all the time, why don't we try handball? And I'm pretty sure we were one of the first teams to start that style. And I think it upset other clubs, upset them.
Did you have a feeling of sort of invincibility during that era when you were playing? Did you just turn up to games thinking we're going to...
No, we after the streak sort of got to about halfway, it was like playing a final every Saturday. And I think when the time was finished, I think we were all pretty glad about it, because it would put a lot of pressure on us, because the papers were saying, 20, 21, 22, and as I say, it's like playing a final every week.
Mm. What are your memories of the 51 and 52 grand final?
Great memories, because I was the youngest of that group, and it was a great excitement to be picked in that side, and the 51-52 side would have won the premiership. As you said, you're playing with Flanagan, Davis, Pianto and Tresize, Middlemiss and Hyde, Bruce Morrison. It was a great side, and we deserved, I think, to win the 2 premierships.
Part of that great run too was a phenomenal unbeaten streak.
Yes, 26. We played in 26 winning runs, and it was a great thrill to be in that. There's one player I'd like to make a comment. There's only one player, Russ Renfrey, who played in every game. And he was a good player, a good ruck rover. And Bob Davis told the story, but I'd tell the story as well. When we have the people coming around the ground, we have the folks come and they look through all the rooms, and you can always tell this story and you always get a laugh, because we're playing Melbourne down here it was our 22nd streak that we were winning. Half time we were about 4 goals down, and as usual Hickey would go around to all the players and tell them what to do, how they can improve their game. And we're just about running out at this stage, and Hickey sang out to Bill Renfrey. He said, I want you to get ferocious. And Renfrey turned around and said, what number's he, Reg? So that caused a bit of a stir, and that's a true story, and Hooker knows that. But it was a good run, and Collingwood beat us in our 27th game.
51. You were able to back up again in 52. It's something this team of this era hasn't been able to do. How tough was it to go back to back?
With the side we had, I don't think it was that tough at all, because they were brilliant players, and they proved in 51 what they can do, and they just carried on in 52 in the same manner. We had the same side. I think there was only one change. I don't think Jeff Williams came into that side in 52. But, they'd played together for so many games. Everybody knew each strength. And, it was a tremendous era in that time.
Obviously, it was a terrific season for you, 1950. What was the secret ingredient for your great play that season?
Well, if you ask my 2 other half-back flankers, I'll say it was them, but... I don't know. I just attacked the ball, and we all did that. We hardly played any negative football, and we started the attack from the back line, which Norm Smith always credited us with. and you know, it was positive all the time. And we had such a good team too, which made it a lot easier to play in.
Did 1950 sort of set the foundation for those two great years that were about to come in 51 and 52? And what was that era like to play in?
Well, it was marvellous. There was so many players that would have made any other league side that didn't have the opportunities. And I think in our 51-52 teams, if you take the two teams, I don't think there'd be any more than about 26, 27 players played. I'm not quite sure of that figure, but it was a great thrill, and it was we played so well together. It wasn't that the coach told you so much, but I started off as a young fellow, very young, and I had two experienced, hardened players on each side of me in the half-back flanks. And
who was that?
Norm Scott and Percy Hunt. And one particular day, one of the centre-half forwards knocked me over, and the next minute I look up and Percy Hunt standing over him and threatening him, if he ever does that again, he'll be carried off feet first. So that made you feel a lot safer and freer to play.
That must have been an extraordinary time to be part of a team that you just knew when you stepped onto the field that good things are going to happen.
Yeah, it was. It was probably very hard for Reg Hickey for 26 games without a loss for him to think of something new to say or to criticise us for. But no, we just had confidence in each other, and you know, we're all different personalities and different people, but we just were very lucky and we all clicked together.
What was the 51 grand final like? That particular win to finally get, it's been a while since the last premiership.
37.
So you're back in the big show now. What was the day like, and how did it unfold, that experience for you?
Well, the biggest thrill, of course, of all time. The crowd was just unbelievable, and it was reasonably tight game all day. I think we reasonably had it under control, but you sort of, the first impression was when you ran out to the, on the ground, and the roar of the crowd, and then you got around to the outer where all the Geelong people were, and you just wondered, you know, you just floated around. And I've never forgotten Peter Pianto, who was our hardest player, hardest trainer and fittest fella, and we're standing there waiting for the what do you call it? The King song, national anthem, and I can hear a voice saying, "Oh, wished I'd done more. I should have done more training. I should have done more laps. I should have did this." And I look around, it's Peter Pianto. But that until the ball was bounced, it's just something that, you know, you never forget.
How much of a challenge was it then to back up and still be so successful in 52? It's one of the hardest things to do, is to repeat as premier or a champion of any kind.
Yeah.
You guys just did it with aplomb. It was something.
Yeah, well, we won a lot easier in 52. I don't know. I just think, like, we were a pretty young side. We had 3 or 4 older fellas, 5, but most of us were reasonably younger, so I just think it was a natural improvement. And as you said earlier, the confidence.
Tell us about game day, 51 grand final, and how you were able to get across the line with...
The match itself?
Yeah.
Well, I think we always thought we could win. We'd won enough games and we had the sort of personalities in the side that really thought we could win. John Coleman didn't play, and a lot of people say that if he had played, Essendon would have beaten us. I don't believe that. We in that era was a bit like the era at present. You know, their attitude to the game that this side hates getting beaten and they know how to win. Well, I think our side was a bit the same. They knew how to win, and I remember that day they came at us in the last quarter, and our fellas they wanted to win that much that they all produced a little bit more. And I think it doesn't matter about John Coleman, that we'll never know anyway, although he's an extraordinary footballer. We really wanted to win. That's the part that I've always carried out of the game. And it was, you know, it was a good side because, you know, of the personalities in the side. That's what I thought.
How strong mentally was that team then to be able to back up and keep winning, keep that streak going through 52 and go back to back? I think this team's tried to do a couple of times so far, and again this year, but haven't been able to accomplish. Going 2 in a row is quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, well, look, the sad part about it is it should have been 3 in a row. We should have beaten Collingwood in 53, but maybe the mental side of it took over then. There was something a little bit different that time, but 52 was a lot easier. 52, well, I can remember before the game, and people, you know, the players were saying, we're going to thrash this mob. This won't be a contest. And that's the way it turned out. They were a very confident side. But I think in 53 there was just something went wrong. And I don't know what it was, whether it wasn't planned right. Most of the fellas that you talk to say that 53 was a better side than 52. But we didn't win.
We spoke to Jeff Williams earlier today, who arrived in this team in 52 and had an amazingly successful impact personally and with the team, winning the best and fairest, best on ground in the 52 grand final and part of a premiership team. What was he like as a character and such a young boy coming in amongst all these other established stars?
Well, Jeff didn't drink. Jeff was more or less a religious person. Nothing wrong with that. But he wasn't like your Hooker Renfrey and those fellows. And he was thought of as a very good footballer. He was a poor kick, like in today's football. Jeff wouldn't be the player he was then, unless he was taught to kick a bit straighter. Most people, when Jeff got it, and he got it a lot, you'd stop still and wait till he kicked it, and then you'd run to where he kicked it. But he got it a lot. He was a good runner. He was highly thought of. But there were a few people in the side that didn't drink. They kept to themselves, virtually. And a lot of the others that did drink, there was never any separation of people, but there were two classes of people in those days.
Was that part of the success of the team? There was a bit of a juxtaposition between the straight-laced non-drinkers against the characters and the guys who might have played up a bit, and that was maybe a nice balance as to...
Yeah, I think so. That's only my opinion on that. One lot sat up the front of the bus coming home, and the other group sat up the back. And they did the drinking and the storytelling and the singing, and there was a wonderful spirit amongst them, and there was no division at all. I've seen so many football clubs over the years, but it was a pretty particular group of people. You know, they were very good at playing football. They had wonderful spirit, and there was a great spirit amongst them. Jeff was like Russ Middlemiss. There was quite a few that didn't drink. Kept to themselves a bit. Saturday nights they'd go one direction and the rest might go the other direction. But it was never thought of or brought up or never mentioned.
But when you, the whole week before, I think Reg had rung all the bosses and said, give everyone a quiet week, we don't want any mishaps.
You're
in a wool store.
Brucey Morrison and I were painters with JC Taylor's, and we were painting down at a wool store preparing the top deck for the wool sales. And Mr. Harold Hagger, I think his name was, he was the boss of the painting section, and his brother was Lloyd Hagger, who was a Geelong full forward many years ago, or not so long before us. And his words were, he said, take it easy, boys, don't want you to get hurt. Well, to tell Bruce to take it easy, he's unbelievable. He never ever exerted himself even on a footy field. He just did it so easy. Anyway, it was a beautiful September morning, and we're up on the sloping roof, sunbaking, stripped down to the waist. And I just went to stand up, and next minute I'm sliding down this roof, and there's this wall of windows there, and I thought, oops, I'm gone. But I must have hit the bar that was holding the row of window, one of the bars, and that stopped me from falling about 15 feet. So the Hick came up somehow. I don't know where. I don't think Hick worked there. I thought he was at Dalgetty's, and I think it was Denny's Lascelles that I was at. Anyway, he came up. They took me up. I went up to the hospital, and I think I had a trainee doctor. He just didn't know how to get the bluntest needles ever. Yeah, they put 13 stitches in the gut and 3 in the wrist. And I thought, oh well, looks like that's the end of this year for me. But no, I felt confident I could get through, and they patted me up for the game. Against Collingwood it was, yeah. They patted me up. Hick tested me out on the Thursday night, and I said I was okay to go for it. I think I got tested a few times. Naturally enough, you would. If I saw someone with a broken leg, I'd help. If they were playing against me in the final, I'd make sure it stayed that way. But we got through it. And
how dominant were you guys during that era? Obviously, the 2 premierships, but just every week to come up and... Yeah,
well, I was very pleased when the half-back line got called out all the time as a settled side. One thing about it... how would I put it? I've lost my train of thought there on that.
51, 52, the settled side, and just...
It was a very settled side, and very few changes. I think Ron Hovey, well, I'd hate to know how long Ron was 19th man in his first 2 years. He was a permanent 19th man, and in those days, if you went off, you stayed off. You didn't get back on, so you often played through with an injury of some sort, just so you could hold your place. I remember Sidney Smith saying to me on the 52 grand final, he said, don't walk down a dark lane, Mitty. I said, why? He said, you won't come out. I said, if I've got to worry about you, Smith, I've got nothing to worry about. That's because Sidney was a permanent 19th man too. Yeah. Just trying to get in. I think he did get in at 19th man in the final. Yeah.
Tougher grand final to play in of those 2 wins, were they equally...
The other finals?
Yeah, the 2 premiership wins. Tell us a bit about those days.
Oh, the euphoria was very good, really. Like, we've been down, when was their last? 37. So it had been a while before drinks, so the town was very exciting for the town. And in those days, one match there, when we were going well, we played Carlton, and we had a crowd that they'd love to get now. We had 49,000 at the Cardinia Park playing Carlton there one day. Unbelievable. Now their limit's about 30.
Just on that, how important was the team to the town of Geelong during your days? Obviously winning premierships, but I guess that
I know a lot of people that don't barrack for Geelong, and that they amaze me, really. They have a hatred for it, and I think you're born and bred here. You've got enjoyment out of a team. It's very successful. It's backed by Ford and that employed I think nearly 80% of players that came down here worked at Ford's at some time or the other, and they've been sponsors. But you can tell by the buzz in a town when the premiership's on, all the bunting in the shops and all that. It's tremendous.
What are your memories of grand final week leading up to the big day?
It was, it was a nervous time, I suppose, because it was new to most of us. We hadn't, the finals were, we had a bit of experience in the year before in finals and that, but, really, it is an experience, running out, as Hyde said, and the atmosphere, and then after, we didn't have the ceremony and that they have now. Crowd went on the ground and half carried you off or pushed you off, and that was it. And then the trip home here. And
what was your reaction like from the local fans when you came back to Geelong in 51?
Very good, yeah. They lined the cars tooting horns and things like that. But it was over pretty quick, These days, the last grand finals, they had street parades the next week and our celebrations went on. We just sort of had that night, and then we had a celebration dinner. That's about it, I think, what I can remember.
So from those experiences, what sort of, how did you feel about what the footy team meant to the town of Geelong back in those days?
Yeah, well, it's, I suppose because most of the people, supported the club, and it was a big part of the town, of course, and especially when you hit finals, it was very exciting. And there was a lot of support outside Geelong, the Western District people used to come down. And,
what was the difference in 51? How were you able to get over the top of Essendon in that game? What was the difference?
I think probably we went in having the rest, and I think it paid off in the second half. They were in front of us at half time, but we seemed to get a second wind and got a lead, and although they come back, we were unable to hold them. But I think the freshers might have helped a bit. Well, historically, that's what they've always said over the years. If you got that rest, most of the teams won when they got to the grand final.
When you're part of a group that wins the premiership, how hard was it mentally to have the attitude right the following season to go again and win it all? Because that was the start of your great streak.
Yeah, I think, as I say, I was injured most of 52 and got back late, but I think generally after winning the 51, the confidence and went higher, and it wasn't a worry whether you could win one. It was, I think, they just become a better team, and most of them were at the top of their form, at the top of their careers. There wasn't, it was a very even side.
What were the circumstances in 51 about your report with Bob Swampy Simon, they say? In the 51 grand final, as mentioned today, you're the only reported player during this era, but tell us the story of that.
Well, first of all, I took the mark and he knocked me down. He come late, and it hurt, and I'd done the block, I think, because I knew it was deliberate. You always know when something comes a bit late, you know. Anyhow, I was bowled over, and he was sort of standing over, and I still had the ball, and I think I still had the ball. Anyhow, I just threw my feet at him when laying on my back, and they called it hacking, which was a polite word for kicking. But I'm pretty sure I never touched him. But anyhow, the goal umpire reported Simon for hitting me, but he got off because they reckon he was too far away to be clear what Simon did. But anyhow.
What happened to you at the tribunal?
Well, I just stated what I thought I did, or I wasn't exactly, I wasn't quite sure what I really did. But I was a bit stiff this way if I did do it, which I probably did. Hicks, the boundary umpire, he had a real record for reporting blokes. So I was a bit stiff that way, because Jamison was right under my feet when I took the mark, and he was the central umpire, so he must have thought I didn't do too much wrong.
Did you get any suspension? Weeks?
6 weeks. And it would have hurt, only I hurt my knee playing cricket, and I spent 3 parts of the year getting it right, so that 6 weeks was spent getting my knee right. So, but it would have hurt if I'd had to sit there and watch, and eligible to play and couldn't because of the 6 weeks. I wouldn't have.
What are your memories of your coach? Tell us about Reg Hickey as a man and as a coach of you.
Well, I think it applies to any coach really. After a while, you don't. Well, as Hyde said, that he didn't have much bullets to fire at you in my time there, but I'm more. I can remember sometimes when he got you on your own, give you a punch in the muscle to emphasise something, but generally he certainly didn't have blackboards and whiteboards, what they call them, and all the theories they go on these days. He left everybody to their own devices, and I think he regarded if you're good enough to get a game, you didn't need to be told how to play, you know.
He was quite a tough disciplinarian though, wasn't he? He was very hard on how to play the Geelong way.
Oh yes, he was in my. I can always remember the first time he had a go at me, and I got a free kick in front of him pretty well, and it'd been raining before we run out, and anyhow I sliced it and off the boundary, and then a bit later on I got another kick near him and kicked in the man the mark that time, and at half time I thought he because we were winning, I think, and I thought he was maybe going to pat me on the back. He remembered the whole half that he said he shouldn't try to drop kick when the ground was a bit wet. So that's about the first time I remember having to say anything to me. But generally he didn't, he just, I don't think I remembered much of his speeches or anything like that.
It was the start of an amazing run of success for the club, obviously back-to-back premierships. What was it like to be part of a team that was so dominant, so successful?
Well, it was, well, 1951. 1950, in 1951, when we won the premiership, you know, it was one of the greatest things you could ever do was to run out in the football ground, the Melbourne cricket ground, you know, and I can remember one incident stands out in my mind. When I was a kid, I was very shy, you know, about 18, and there was a girl from down there that left and went to Melbourne, and I was playing up in the Melbourne cricket ground, and I was right near the fence when she yelled out to me, you know, and I looked over, and this Fancy Lukovic was looking at me, you know, and I hadn't seen her for years, sort of thing. It was quite a thrill to see her, but you know, I think probably things that stand out in my mind is when we start to kick on, and then we played in the 51 and won the grand final. It's the most amazing feeling you could ever get is to run out in the Melbourne cricket ground. After that, go on, any questions?
Yeah, those 3 years though must have been an amazing time.
Well, they were. We started. The 26 without a loss started in 1952. 1952 and finished in 53. But I didn't know until 30 years later that I was the only one that played in the 26 without a loss. And that's one record I got. I didn't have too many. But that's one record I got, and Bob Davis, we didn't know about that until years later. But, you know, I played with fellas like Bob Davis on the half forward, Fred Flanagan centre half forward, who captained the side in the premiership. You know, some of my memories, and some of the memories of the fellas in those days, you'd go and have a drink with them after. You know, after you beat them or they beat you, you'd go and have a drink, and we were very, very friendly. Because, I don't know, that changed after many, many years, I know, but that used to be great, that sort of thing, but it was, I think, giving yourself a name was Geelong. And when we first came home in 1951, Chris, I reckon there was 10 or 12,000 people outside the town hall to welcome us in the buses. Because we used to travel to Melbourne by bus, walk through Werribee, and then the bus would pick us up the other side, and then off we'd go.
What do you mean walk through Werribee?
Well, the bus would pull up and let us walk through Werribee on the way to Melbourne, when we played in Melbourne. And we'd walk through Werribee for a bit of exercise, and then get on the bus and, you know, finish up at the ground we're going to play at.
Reg Hickey was in charge of that era.
Yes, he was.
Tell me about him as a man and
look,
coach.
I had the greatest admiration for Reg Hickey. Tough. You could be standing, you know, like in those days we used to stand outside the club rooms of the footy club, which was on the corner of Mallow Street and Jerringham Street here in Geelong. There was a cafe there. We'd meet there and get on the bus. If you're standing and he'd backhand you in the belly, you know, you'd wind you and all that, so tough as nails. And but look, I had the greatest admiration for him. He was a man's man, and he commanded respect. You know, like he didn't have to be a good coach. He commanded respect, and he said if we leave players, we should know how to play too. That's the way it was in those days. Because if you ask him how to play, you're a league player, you know how to play, but he'd tell you, like, he was a good coach, great coach, and he got good results. He got 2 premierships, and he should have had 3. Straight.
So why did you have to get ferocious?
Yeah, tell me the get ferocious.
About ferocious. Bob Davis, that's how I started off. And Bob Davis, this is his story. He said, one day, Hick said, "You're not going too well, Hooker. This is you're going out at half time, right?" He said, "I want you to get ferocious." And I said, "Hick, what number is he, Hick?" that was Bob Davis. That was he told. Because Ron Hovey still tells us. Yeah. And Hyde said, John Hyde, who played, you know, Johnny. Johnny said, "Well, I've heard that 7,423 times, you know?" Yeah.
Tell me about Fred Flanagan.
Fred Flanagan, brilliant centre half forward. A very fair player. Good. Like, he represented his state for 8 years, Well, he was probably at the time one of the best full centre half forwards in the competition. You know, there was a lot of good players, but Fred was he represented his state from down here. He captained the side in 51, 52 and 53. He's a great mate of mine. He was different to others. When I say different to others, Fred was a more loner man, more loner than, if you know what I mean. I used to tell him, I'd tell him, there's not no secret about it. I used to say, he's the only fella could leave halfway through a word. Fred, you know. But we were good mates, right all the way through, still are good mates. But he was a brilliant centre-half forward. There's no doubt about that. I think there's been a bit of controversy about whether he deserves to be in, what do they call the big one? Hall of Fame. He's in the Hall of Fame, but the other one. No, see, I don't. To my opinion is, Fred. He played eight years interstate. He kicked 180 something goals, I think. But you know, in my career, Fred played for 3 games or 5 games into his 10th year. I played 14 games into my 11th year, and I kicked 167 goals. And I played in the back pocket for 8 years and ruck roved. I thought about it, you know, Fred should have kicked a lot more from the centre half forward. Always centre half forward. Can I tell you the story about centre half forward when I played centre half forward?
Yep. 1 second.
All right.
Let me just. Who was the best player that you played with or against in your?
Oh, without a doubt, John Coleman.
Oh, right.
The greatest players I ever saw. Bernie Smith, not far behind. Bernie Smith, he couldn't teach anybody how to play football. He just knew how to do it. You know, like, he was a brilliant... And of course, even in the practice, mucking around, he'd stand on my hip, the little twerp, you know, and all that sort of thing. And he could climb. He's the only player I've ever seen, Chris, that I reckon he used to hang in the air. When he'd go up, he seemed to hang there, and the ball would drop in his hands. You know, he was an incredible player. And things like they grabbed him. He was cornered one day by 4 fellas. He handed the ball to one bloke and grabbed the bloke and got a free kick. That type of player he was. Hey, that's how smart he was. He did things automatically. He was brilliant, Smith. He was a brilliant footballer. Probably not far behind. Coleman was so good in the air, and a hell of a nice bloke too.
Do you have any specific memories of the 51 grand final and 52? Can you take me back to those 2 games?
Yeah, I think the 50... my memories are... It's a wonderful feeling. Yes, I have got wonderful memories. I'm not sure whether it was a 52 where the crowd jumped the fence and they were on the boundary. Do you know anything about that? 52 or 51? 52 could have been. In the grand final, the crowd were over the fence, right around the boundary, over the fence, and when you got hit off the ground, you know, you got hit, or they'd push you back onto the ground again. That was incredible, that. So, and they said there was 80,000 people. There was a lot more than that there. A lot more than that there. That was in, I have an idea it was 52, was it, Chris? 52, that. The photograph of the crowd around it was incredible, that. But the thrills, look, the thrills to running out of that Melbourne cricket ground, you never, ever forget that, Chris. It's always with you for the rest of your life. It's a wonderful feeling, put it that way.
It's back-to-back.
Back-to-back premiership. I think probably the second one wasn't as wonderful as the first. You sort of got used to it. 53 was like another game to me, a little, if you understand it. The third one, but I didn't expect to be full forward, because I said to Hick, "What the hell did you put me there for?" He said, get out and do your job and shut up. So that was the finish of that. But I'm just saying, that wasn't the thrill. That wasn't the thrill that I got in the first, running out the Melbourne Cricket Ground the first time. You know, you thought you were JC really, and you weren't.
You won 2 premierships for Geelong. What was football? How important was football to the community of Geelong back in those days? How important was the?
Oh, it was. Just more important in those days at Geelong than it is now. It was what, everything for Geelong. You know, when Geelong was winning, the town was jumping. Oh, that meant a hell of a lot to Geelong. There's no doubt about that.
And what are some of your memories of coming back into Geelong after winning premierships?
Well, the one is where we come in. I was sitting on the top of the bus. We come in the bus, you know, the front of the bus, and when we come around through Mercer Street into the town hall. And of course, we all were interviewed in the town hall, but that was a great thrill to see the great big crowd there. It was incredible. It was like being at a football match again. And because that was similar too on the 52. Not so similar on the 53.
Well, the record tells you what they were. So that's the main thing that I can remember. It was just this, you'd walk into the rooms and the whole thing was, there wasn't any doubting people around at all. When you had fellows like Jeff Williams, who came here the year I did, and he walked into a premiership side from the year back before on the half-back flank. And if you like, as a statement, there were heaps of half-back flankers around. He walked in and he won the best and fairest in his first year. And I think that's quite incredible. It's not talked about a great deal, but it staggers me that a bloke can come from Warragul and walk into a premiership side, permanent position, never have to listen to hear whether he was selected on Thursday night, which is a mark of, you know, we never listened to the side, we just knew you were in.
You arrived here in 52 on the back of the team winning a premiership and slotted in pretty well. You were won a Kaji Greaves medal in your first year. How were you able to come in as a young boy, and have such an impact on such a great team? What was the reason for you to be so successful in that first year?
Well, it was the camaraderie down here, and the fact that it was considered a countryside, Geelong, and the players made you feel very welcome. The officials made you feel very welcome. Jack Ross, chairman of selectors, Len Metherell, and these chaps who were well-known ex-Geelong players, and the whole of the atmosphere was a family one. I mean, after the game, we would, the social club would clear the training room out, take the training tables out, and we'd have a dance. We'd come down after the game and have a dance. And there were other activities which they organised, but now it's a business. I mean, you've got to be down here at 4 o'clock or whatever time and do special training. You've got to have training various times during the day. And, they don't have a job. The job is what they're doing, playing football. But it was a totally different atmosphere, a more friendly one, and everyone got on so well with one another.
What did it mean to you to win the Kaji Greaves medal in your first year? What did it mean to you to win the Kaji Greaves medal in your first season?
Well, that was something that I didn't expect, something that I wasn't looking for. But it was the help of the players in the side, as I said earlier, with Bernie Smith saying that to me, and then Leo Turner, and then the others in the side all cooperated. And of course we had a very good half-back line of Middlemiss, Hyde and Williams, and that was unchanged for about 16 games. And it was only that Russ Middlemiss got a knee problem that altered the lineup. But we had a sixth sense feeling of cooperation, of knowing, all right, if one was in trouble, you'd come around or you'd be around and they'd know to handball out to you, and you had that attacking football. And I think we at Geelong started this rebounding football, in which from the half-back line you kicked long or you rebounded the ball fast up to your forward line. And the fact that I won the best and fairest first year was a tremendous thrill, but a lot of the team must take credit for that.
During 52 was part of that 26-game unbeaten streak. There was 23 wins in a row there as well. You spoke about that sixth sense. The players just knew where everybody else was. Was that a real important part of that successful run? And can you just talk a little bit about how you were able to just continually win so many games in a row and obviously back-to-back premierships?
Yeah, that is was one of the strengths of the side. We had a settled side and we knew the capabilities of each player, and we were able to coordinate their ability with playing football. And to see with Bobby Davis, well, he was the Geelong flyer, and we would kick the ball ahead of him, not to him. We'd kick it ahead of him, and with his pace he would mark it and do what he had to do. But always he had his socks up. He didn't like his socks down. That was one of the... He wanted to always play on the wing where the crowd was. So it was a bit of a crowd pleaser, and we had those type of players. But playing together for so long, you did have a sixth sense of knowing where to be and what the other player was going to do.
What are your memories of that 52 grand final?
Well, very fond memories. As I said, I was living in Melbourne, boarding out at Malvern, and the rest of the team in those days, we all came up by bus. The bus stopped at Werribee. We walked through Werribee to stretch our legs, hopped on board, and then came to the ground. Now, I believe all the players get up there individually, but that was another thing where the bus up and the bus home cemented the camaraderie of the players, and you know, it was not as if you just play a game and then disappear. You all came home and you were a team. But for the grand final, I was at Malvern, and I caught the train into... Well, by the way, I had to work that morning in the bank. The banks were open on a Saturday morning, and I was in the head office, and I had to work. So I went in 8:30, 8:15, and I went past the MCG, and there were these snake queues out from the ground, because in those days you didn't have booking, you just had your ticket to get into the ground, and the gates would open at a certain time, and the people would queue up behind the gate and where their ticket indicated, and they went in, and usually you put the fast ones in front of you so that they could get in, go up the stairs to wherever they wanted to sit, put their rugs down and wait for the slow ones with crooked knees and wait for the slow ones to come up. Anyhow, I went in, all those queues of people were outside the ground. Some might still remember that. And then, they were very generous. They let me off at 11 o'clock, so I caught the train back to Malvern, and as I went past the MCG, I could hear the roar of the crowd of the curtain raiser that they had in those days. They had a curtain raiser, and I could hear the roar of the crowd and hear me, one of the players, going home for lunch. So I went to Malvern, had lunch, caught the train back to Richmond, and the father met me at Richmond. We walked from the station over the bridge to the MCG, and he went in his gate where his ticket was, and I went in mine. And as I went into the room, the whole of the training room or dressing room was decked out in white and blue streamers. And the father was the art teacher up at the Geelong High School, and he must have, for the month before, got every student making cats, little cats. I suppose you've seen them around the place, and they were all over the room. And Well, Georgie Ginnon was on a training table and he was asleep. Georgie, as casual as he is. And then there were the trainers, and they seemed to be all far more important on grand final day. They were running around and doing what they had to do. And one of them was going around handing out yellow pieces of paper. Now, what were they? You won't remember, will you? Well, they were telegrams, because back in those days, people could send telegrams to the ground, to the player at the ground, and they would wish them all the very best and good luck and so forth. And these trainers were handing out the telegrams to the various players. And then the time came, and we just sat on the training tables. Hick was in the middle, none of this auditorium business and so forth where you go to now. And he just told us the plan. As I said, he wasn't really a tactician. He was a man who got you behind him all the time, and you would do anything for Hick. And the president, Jack Jennings, said a few words. Then Jack Ross, the chairman of selectors, said a few words. And then Fred Flanagan, the captain, said a few words, and then off. And as we opened the door onto the ground, the race, the roar of the crowd was tremendous. You'll never forget that. And, as I said, on my first run on the MCG, I felt I didn't have any legs. And the same thing happened again. We went round the members' side, and there was just a little bit of sedate clapping and so forth. And then we came down to the city end and came around up to the Richmond end and the outer stand, and as you came to the various groups of Geelong supporters, because you were in a block or you knew where the Geelong supporters were, the crowd would clap, and it was like the surf coming in on a beach. You'd go up to an area of concentrated Geelong supporters, and the noise was fantastic, and then it died down a little bit as you ran around, then it would come up again. And it was fabulous.
What about game? And then the game unfolds. You guys are able to get on top. And
oh yes, well I think you all got to have a few little nerves inside you, and it's just a matter of how you control them. I mean, the excitement of the day and everything like that would make you a little bit nervous. But once the ball was bounced, well, you had a job to do, and that's where you had to throw them aside and not let them come on top of you.
Fantastic. Good. It's been quite the trifecta for you then. You won the best and fairest of the club, win a premiership, and the best on ground in a grand final in your first year. It doesn't go any, just goes downhill from there, doesn't it?
Well, now when you
a thrill for you, to be named best on the field in the grand final.
When you look back on it, I suppose that's rather a unique record, isn't it? And I don't know if it's ever been done again, but it was just one of those things that came along. That I was helped by the players, as I said, the feeling of the players. They didn't think I was an outsider by not training with them. They accepted me very well, which was a big factor. And the whole atmosphere of the club was tremendous. And yes, when you look back at that, it's rather unique, but something I was very fortunate to be able to do.
Amazing.
And I also won the best and fairest in 55. So the first year wasn't a fluke.
No, I'm sure it wasn't. Good stuff. I want you just to give us a brief memory of some of your teammates from that era and some of the captains. Sum up Fred Flanagan.
Yeah, well, we only had one coach, and that was Reg, and he was a man-to-man type of thing. He was in charge of the floor down at the Elders, the wool store in Geelong, and he ran it with a very strict discipline, the same as what he did with the club and with the players. But he was a family man. He would ask players up to his house repeatedly. during the season, and entertained them up there. I never got asked because I probably lived in Geelong, but he mainly the ones that were down from the country and so forth. So he was the only coach that I had. As far as the players were concerned, well, of course you could go through the list there, and you had some fantastic players. Fred Flanagan, he was always the leader, and in those days the difference attitude that the players have and the umpires is tremendous, because I mentioned I came down here for a practice game before I signed up, and I was on Fred, and Harry Beitzel was the umpire, and only one umpire in those days, and he was running. Fred took a mark at centre-half forward, and he was going down to the goal, and he went past Fred and said, "I'll bet you 2 bob, Fred, you don't kick it." Well, for an umpire to say that to a player nowadays, they'd get reported. And consequently, Freddie goes back, and a beautiful long kick, a drop kick, and right through the goal. And then afterwards, it was quite a common occurrence for the umpires to come into the game, into the rooms of the team, of the home team. And so Harry came in, and lo and behold, he went up to Fred. "Well, here's your 2 bob, Fred," and paid him off. But we had some characters, Russell Renfrey and Bernie Smith. They kept the place alive. One night we were all out in the middle of the ground, and training was so different in those days. You went out and did 2 laps of the ground, and you had kick to kick either end with the goals. And then Hick would get you into the middle of the ground and tell you what happened and why we lost, which wasn't very often in those days. And lo and behold, 2 players were missing, Smithy and Renfrey. And they came out of the race, and they were giggling a little bit to one another and fooling around, and they did their 2 laps, and we were still out in the middle, and Hickey yells out, "Come over here!" And so they started to go over to him, and Hick was a brilliant stab kick, and he had the ball, and he did a stab kick to Smithy and hit Smithy in the middle in his guts, and he fell straight over. And righto Renfrey, and so the same thing happened to him. His ball dropped short, and Hooker went down to pick it up, and he fell over. And they were both full. And they'd been to the Geelong Golf Club celebrations or opening or something like that in the afternoon, and consequently they had a bit too much to drink, and they thought they'd get away with the training. So after we were split into 3 groups, and the first group was always the ones who played well or the ones who were fit. The second group were the middle ones. The last group were the drinkers, or the ones who played poorly and were struggling, and they had to do extra training. So naturally they were placed in the last group, and so when we were all dressed by the time they came in, and so Hickey said, "Right, Renfrey and Smith, you're to front the match committee on Monday," and this was Thursday night. So we were playing Carlton, I think, that day, and no, Collingwood, because Hickey put Smithy on Bobby Rose, see, and so Smithy didn't give Bobby Rose or the Rovers a kick all day, and Renfrey did the same thing. And then after, while we were getting a shower and so forth, Hickey gets on the table and announces, he said, "Smith and Renfrey, there's no need for you to come up and see the match committee on Monday." They played such a good game that was the result. Nowadays, it's totally different. You had that humanity, you had that human feeling that was through the club.
Brilliant.
And then another interesting one was this bloke Bobby Davis, and he was always the comic of the team. And it was pouring rain. We'd had rain during the week, and this side of Cardinia Park was a quagmire, and now it's like a billiard table. It's beautiful. And so we were all out in the middle, and Bobby comes out through the gate by himself in a black Macintosh, gumboots, and a rain hat. And so he does his lap around the ground, and we were all in the centre, and he runs up and said, "Hick," he said, "I can't train tonight, it's too wet." Hickey just looked at him and said, "Righto, Bobby, you'll do your training in what you've got." And so he had to go around in gumboots and a Macintosh and a hat and do his training. So, those little things had a big effect on the fact of the team being as one.
So it sounds like it was a lot of fun in your day as well as the business.
Oh yeah, I reckon it is, yes. We had a lot of fun. It wasn't a business as what it is now. We all had a job, and we'd come down at 4 o'clock and go home afterwards, and then the whole setup has changed completely, and it's different, I suppose, now than we enjoyed it, and it was tremendous as far as being part of it.
Neil Tresize was one of your captains?
Nipper?
Neil, yeah?
Neil Tresize, yes.
What can you tell me about him? What was he like as a captain and skipper?
Nipper. He was a tremendous guy, a brilliant rover, and before the game, going up to Melbourne, we used to go to the cafe opposite the Carlton Hotel, the Green Star, I think it was called, and we could go in there and have a meal, and dinner before we went up on the bus. And so Nipper was at our table once, and we had fish. We all had fish, and I played a reasonably good game. And so the next time we were playing up in Melbourne, he comes up and says, "Jeff," he says, "I'm going to have fish in, see how that goes with me." And so he had the fish, and he played a tremendous game. So he had fish for lunch for the period of time until he played a poor game, and then he decided to eat something else. He was rather superstitious like that, and a very friendly player. Got on well with him.
Great. And what about, you mentioned him a little bit before, but the impact Bernie Smith had on this club and your time as a teammate?
Yeah, well, Bernie, coming from South Australia, and he was a quiet, unassuming type of guy, but he had a big influence on the club, and of course he went into business with Bobby Davis, the two of them, in the printing game, and he was very well respected and known in Geelong, and he had a quiet influence on the team, and that was a big factor. We didn't really have many troublemakers or problems with players, and I think that was the fact that all the players respected each other, and they worked in with each other.
What's been the best thing about your football career? What do you take out of your time playing VFL, and I guess what's the legacy? Well,
it was the friendships, the friends that you made, both on and off the ground, and the officials were tremendous. Ivo Gibson was a secretary at that stage, and as I mentioned, Jack Ross, chairman of selectors, and Len Metherell and Fred Hawking, all well-respected players. And it was like a happy family, really, and it was something you were privileged to be in, because, as I said, you only got £3 a week, and in those days it was a fair bit of money, not the four figures that you get now, some of the players, per game. And the whole setup was different, and after the game, when you showered and so forth, you had your girlfriends or your wives waiting outside the door in in the weather for you to come out, you know, and then you'd go home and then you'd come down and as I said earlier, have a dance in the training room of after the game, and there was that camaraderie between everyone, and the older players, Fred and Renfrey and Tommy Morrow and the likes of those, made the younger ones feel at home, and that was one of the biggest factors of being able to assimilate into a club, and especially with me being away for the first couple of years. And you know, the blue and white spirit is there, but I don't know how close the players are with each other after the game. I know on their days off they go and play golf and all that type of thing, but we had a job. We had to go and work. So things have changed quite a bit in that regard, and I think the camaraderie is still here at the present time, but it's a business.
Fantastic. Tremendous storytelling. Thank you very much for your time. Very enlightening.
Pleasure to be here.
Mm.